here. Good evening, members, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of Plans East. I have to read the following webcasting introduction. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. Therefore, by entering the chamber and using the seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. If anyone is sitting upstairs in the gallery, obviously they will not be recorded. Could I please remind members of the public who have registered to speak that they will be admitted to the meeting at the proper time if they are on Zoom. For the purposes of the webcast and for this meeting, could I introduce myself? My name is Councillor Paul Kesker and I am chairman of tonight's meeting. To my left is Councillor Heather Brady, who is my vice chairman, and to my right is Jerry Godden, a senior planning officer who will be presenting the applications tonight. We will now take item 2. I take it advice to public and speakers has been given. Yes. 3 minutes. Members, pages 9 to 16 are the minutes of our last meeting. Can I take them as being a true record of the meeting, please? Councillor Stalker.
Thank you, Chair. One small amendment. I was missed off the list of apologies for that meeting, if I could be added. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make sure that that is amended. With that alteration, can we take them as a true record? Thank you. Number 4, apologies for absence.
Chairman, I've received apologies from Councillor Rolfe.
Item 5 is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest?
Chairman, I'm still on item 4, if that's all right by you. I have to bring apologies for Councillor Sue Jones and apologies for lateness for the 2 Councillor Whitbreads. They hope to make it later. They're still in another meeting.
Non-pecuniary. God blimey, I'm having trouble. It's item 13 on that. It's EP 0991/21 and it's 189 Lindsay Street, and that's because I'm a near neighbour. So I will leave the meeting at that point.
None, Chairman.
We got it. We got it. Item 6, any other business?
None, Chairman.
Thank you. This, the technology will keep up with us eventually, so we'll plough on. Item 7 is, the Epping Forest District Local Plan Submission Version Planning Policy Briefing Note, and we must be aware that we must take its contents into consideration. We'll move on to number 8, site visits. Members will be aware that until the order is rescinded, anyone who asks for a site visit will not get one, and the matter will be passed up to district development, where at present, if you ask for a site visit, you won't get one there either, and matters could end up coming to full council. So are there any requests for site visits? Yes.
Not a request for a site visit, Chairman, but can we, as Plans East, make a request to the group leaders, now that we are past Freedom Day, to urgently review this, because I think there is no good reason now why we should not be able to do site visits.
Thank you, Councillor Philip. I concur entirely. There really is no reason for us not to be out doing site visits now. Thank you very much. There are no requests there, in which case we will go to item 9 on the agenda, EPF 1718/18, corner of Mill Lane and Millfield, High Ongar.
Thank you, Chairman. This item has been withdrawn from the agenda prior to the meeting, but after the agenda was published.
Thank you very much, in which case that matter has been withdrawn. We will go on then to item 10, which is 0458/21, Homeview, Greenman Road, Magdalen Labour.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application. It says on the description in the agenda, a proposed demolition of existing outbuilding, single-storey rear extension and 2 side dormers. It's been slightly amended that the single-storey rear extension would be retention, as it's already been partially built, and the 2 side dormers have been removed from this application. You can see the site here is in the rural area of the district. It's roughly a triangular site with the building on this side here, opposite the Green Man Public House. The aerial photograph shows the site, which is this property here. The outbuilding to be demolished is in this area here, which you'll get a better view on this close-up picture there. So this outbuilding here will be demolished. Just move this onto something better. So this outbuilding will be demolished, and the extension is in this area here at the back of the property, close to the boundary with the adjacent site. This picture shows the area that has been already commenced with the infill extension, and shows that the window openings onto the fence that is the boundary treatment between this property and the neighbouring property. The existing plan shows the site, and this building is the one to be demolished where my cursor is, and then the infill is in this area here towards the north of the building. So this is what's proposed stroke being built at the moment. It would see the outbuilding removed, a flat roof single storey extension in this area here, of which you've just seen the picture, with 2 roof lights in and 2 windows. The dormers have been removed. Okay, so we're going too far. Right. We have received objections. I'm just trying to get the cursor back. There we go. We've got an objection from the Parish Council of overdevelopment in the Green Belt, conflicting with policies GB2A and GB14A. It should be noticed that GB14A was removed from the local plan some time ago and doesn't actually apply in this instance. Loss of privacy and overlooking around about the dormer windows, which have been removed. It would appear that neither the 25-degree nor the 45-degree rules regarding light can be achieved as the habitable rooms are too close to the boundary. Should be noted the Parish Council understands there is a boundary dispute between the applicant and the adjacent property. Although, as members will be aware, we will not get involved in boundary disputes and who owes what bit of land. And it should be noted that there are gate pillars with lights on the top of the property. This is not part of this application. We also had an objection from Sunnyside regarding the loss of privacy. So the main issues in this case are green belt design and impact on the conditions of neighbours, as you can see from the officer's report. As I said, it should be noted that although the Parish Council have objected to policy GB14A, this was not a safe policy and is actually not a policy that we use. Clearly the house has been extended quite considerably, as you can see from the officer's calculations on page 38. However, it is the case that the outbuilding would be demolished, and it actually reduces the overall mass of the built form on the site by removing this, and the infill at the rear north end of the site is relatively minor and doesn't have any adverse impact on the green belt when viewed from any direction at all, as it's viewed against the backdrop of the existing building. As the officer says, though, we wouldn't look favourably on further applications on the site for this building, but in this instance it's considered, due to the small size, the removal of the building and the fact there is no adverse impact on the green belt, that this is an acceptable scheme in terms of green belt. The same can also be said about design. It's a fairly standard design with a flat roof, which causes no harm to the building when viewed from any particular area. In terms of the impact on the living conditions of the neighbours, clearly the dormers have been removed, so this is no longer an issue. The two windows on the rear elevation of the extension are ground floor windows and face onto a boundary fence, so it's considered there will be no adverse impacts on the living conditions of the neighbours and nor to the application itself. The scheme has two roof lights in it as well, so there should be sufficient light going into this particular section of the building, which is going to facilitate a utility room, which is not a habitable room, so this wouldn't be an issue. So in this instance, it's not considered that there are any harm to the amenities of the neighbours in terms of overlooking or loss of light. And as I've already said, there is a boundary dispute, but this is not something the council can become involved in. So taking all of this into account, the recommendation is to approve permission. Oh, yes, sorry.
Do we have any other photographs?
No, that's the only one.
That's the only one. Okay. In which case, we have three speakers. I could remind all speakers, it's been some time since we've been in a chamber with speakers. You have 3 minutes, and could I ask you to turn your microphones on when you start and to turn them off when you finish. Our first speaker is Mr. Alan Simpson, who is an objector. Mr. Simpson.
Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Alan Simpson. My house is Sunnyside, adjacent to Homeview. The problems I've had in the past, many years ago, there was a dormer put in the back, which supposed to have been a blind dormer, which, as I understood, was going to be wood clad. But windows were put in, albeit they were glazed, so you can't see out. But initially, it should have been a blind dormer. The new plans, looking at it now, there's going to be another dormer, almost twice as big, totally overlooking my garden. One concern I've got is the same thing's going to happen. Instead of it being wood clad, so that you can't actually see out of it, it would be blind, there's going to be windows put in, as was the downstairs on this new small extension. The first plans, there were no windows. Windows were put in. And I understand that, well, this is what it's about, the retro planning. Those windows actually look directly into my garden, where my grandchildren play in the pool, as well as we sunbathe out there. And you would feel as though you're on display for everyone to see from next door. I appreciate he's not going to, or they are not going to be looking through knot holes missing, etc. But nevertheless, it's there. As regards the boundary issue, which is considerable, the fence shouldn't even be there because it's on my land. So the original fence was a chain link, which was taken out, not by me. So my issue is mainly the intrusion into our back garden, which we've never had before. As regards the dormer, so be it if it's going to be wood clad and blind, so that there will be no windows in it. I think other than that, the boundary issue obviously is another matter. The lights out the front, yes, they light up all our front bedroom, which we don't particularly want. And as I understand it, which was pointed out to me by the parish council, that they are above the standard height that is allowed. I think that's about my complaint. The small building out the back, yes, that's been demolished. Obviously, there's not an issue with that, albeit when the boundary dispute is sorted, things will change. I think that concludes what I've got to say, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go on to the next speaker, could I just ask Mr. Godden about the dormer?
Yes, Chairman, there isn't a dormer on this application. It was withdrawn. This is revised plans. There's no dormer proposed.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor Michelle Hall of Morton, Bobbingworth and the Lavers Parish Council by Zoom.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the committee. I'd like to advise you of the MBL Parish Council concerns in relation to this application. The National Planning Policy Framework advises that the government attaches a great importance to the green belt, where the fundamental aim is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open, with its essential characteristic being its openness. The NPPF clearly states that inappropriate development is, by definition, harmful to the green belt, and as such, development and the planning permission should be refused unless very special circumstances can be demonstrated, which clearly outweigh the harm. We do realise that there are some exceptions which include the extension or alteration of the building, providing that it does not result in disproportionate additions over and above the size of the original building, and the replacement of the building, provided the new building is in the same use and not materially larger than the one it replaces. We believe that in the case of this application, substantial harm will occur. We have a number of valid concerns which can be summarised as inappropriate development within the green belt, detrimental to neighbouring residents, and overdevelopment. The Parish Council has already objected to the application, stating that the proposal would be contrary to policy GB14A of the adopted local plan. The planning officer has stated this policy has not been a saved policy for a number of years, and therefore reference to this cannot be taken into consideration. We are unaware of this being noted or being the case. The planning officer states the following: the original house as built had a volume of approximately 587 cubic metres. Over time, the volume of the existing house has increased to approximately 1,352 cubic metres, 130% increase. The volume of the outbuilding to be demolished is around 54 cubic metres, and the volume of the proposed extension is approximately 33 cubic metres, which leads to a reduction in inbuilt form of 21 cubic metres. Given this reduction in built form, EFDC is stating that they consider the scheme would not be causing adverse harm. The Parish Council feels that this does not go far enough, and the Parish Council has already made comment in relation to the light and also to the wall. We therefore ask the committee to consider these comments and planning permission refusal. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee.
Our third speaker is Mr. Eddie Ray, who is the applicant. You also have 3 minutes, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to bring Mr. Simpson up. The dormer has been withdrawn from the plans, so there is no dormer being built. The small building that we offered up against increasing the size of the house has been taken down. The chain link fence that was see-through has now been replaced by a fence that I put up so we can't see through it. I don't want them to look into Mr. Simpson's garden. And your request if there's any photographs, I have some photographs of what we look at out of the window is the fence. These are copies of two windows that are already in that flank wall, which I have a copy of, which also looks at the fence. And conscientiously, the 2 windows that have been put into the extension, which is going to be a store boot room, have been put in lower deliberately, so when you stand and look out the window, you can't see over the fence line. I understand Mr. Simpson's umbrage against this, but we've lived there for 20 years. We haven't been there for 2 years and come into the area with a lot of money. We've been there for 20 years and we're planning to develop the house, which we are doing, to stay there for another 20 years. And as for the street lights, they've been there for 15 years. I'm at a loss now to wonder why he hasn't come round and knocked on my door and asked me to change the timer on them. At the time, my children were young, and as you know, where we live, there is no street lights, hence why my driveway is lit up until about 11 o'clock at night when they come home. If he'd have come round and asked me nicely, I would have changed the timer for him. That's all I've got to say, thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, the recommended decision is to grant permission with conditions. Who is going to start? Is that Councillor? Right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We'll listen to the 2 objectors and the applicant and the expert opinion of our planning officer. And looking at this in summary, it's a minor change. It actually makes the property smaller. And if those of you who've been there to have a look at it, as I have, and on Google Earth, you can barely see the house from the road anyway. All of that, putting it together, basically I can't see any reason to disagree with the planning officer in recommending that this application be accepted. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In the description of the proposal on page 34, it says it's an amended application to EPF 0079/20. I was wondering how much change there was, given that that's an existing planning permission that's been granted and clearly has to be given significant weight in our decision tonight.
I would have to look at that on the plans and come back to you.
That's not really an answer for you, I'm afraid, Councillor Phillip. You're allowed to come back on matters of fact if we can ask you. So if you would like to come back on that one issue only, please speak.
Sorry, before we start, Chair, I'm going to look it up now.
Oh, you are?
Yes, yeah, the system should work, but it just take a couple of minutes. Sorry, should have made that clear.
Right, I'm sorry. I thought this was back in the old days when you had to go back to the office and look it up on the paper. But today we can lose things electronically much easier, so... While we're looking up the previous application, does any other councillor have anything to add to the discussion? Yep, Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to pretty much echo what my colleague Councillor Hadley has said, in the fact that we always sympathise with any loss of privacy when we look at and consider such applications. But I'm very satisfied from both the photographs that we've seen that there isn't a substantial loss of privacy, and none which couldn't be caused if there was windows added to the current structure. So I'm quite satisfied on the privacy perspective.
I have got the plans, I'm just going to try and get them up. Let's hope this works. Right, yes, Chair. So what we can see is this has been granted as a pitched roof on the extension. So that's in this area here. So what you've got there is an extension in that area. I'll just drag this down. So this area has been granted planning permission to be infilled already, but the difference between this application and the one that's granted has got an apex roof on it. So it's got a pitched roof on it, whereas this has got a flat roof, then goes into the apex.
Chairman, if I might come back, thank you, Mr. Godden, for that. That is very helpful. I think given the fact that we already have an extension granted planning permission here, that is a significant fact we have to take on board. I can't see the differences between what we've been shown by Mr. Godden on the two applications gives us any reason why we could refuse this, and as such I'll certainly support it.
Any other councillors? No? In which case the recommended decision is to grant permission with conditions. All those in favour, please show. Against? And abstentions? None. Well, I'd just like to ask. In which case, planning permission is granted. We will then go on to application agenda item 11, which is 0536/21 67 Hemnall Street, Epping.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for demolition of an existing dwelling and the erection of a two-storey detached dwelling as a replacement. So this is the site. It's in the urban area of Epping and Hemnall Street, surrounded on all sides by housing and in some shops. The aerial photograph shows close up. The actual site is this property here, which you can see is somewhat smaller than the two neighbouring properties. You can also see from this is there's no particular form of built development in the street scene. It's rather an eclectic mix in this part of Hemnall Street. The view from the roadway is quite heavily treed in this area. This is the property where the cursor is in question. It will be demolished. So again, where the cursor is, this is the property that will be demolished and rebuilt. And the property is behind where my cursor is. This building is remaining because it's the neighbouring building, and you can just see the back of the property. This is from the side street, which I think is Thaden Place. Yes, I was going to say Grove, but I'd be wrong. Thank you, members. So this is the view of the property from the back, and this shows the house to the north with the white render. And this shows the house to the south, which has a brick facade and an existing two-storey side extension, side and rear extension. This is the existing plans, fairly standard 1950s, 1960s property, and it would be replaced with a bigger property. You can see the red dotted outline on here is the original shape of the dwelling, and the dwelling would be moved backwards, and there would be there would be an increase in built form at the back of the property. You can also see there are protected trees, and the building has been brought back from the building line to come back to accommodate the root protection area of the trees in this area, while still leaving a significant garden area. So the property itself would be a relatively modern crown roof, a two-storey property with rooms in the roof. Nothing particularly unusual about this in kind of urban design terms. We do get a lot of these in the urban areas of the district. So this is the street scene. It would be the same height or slightly above than the neighbouring properties, whereas the existing one is slightly below, but considered not to be a significant issue in this particular area. Right. We have received a number of objections. Town Council have got a strong objection concerned this proposal will look out of place on this carefully styled row of houses. Proposals for a three-storey, not two-storey house. Proposal is overdevelopment in terms of bulk scale on the edge of a conservation area location, loss of amenities for neighbouring properties in terms of light, overlooking and visual impact. Materials are not appropriate in this area, changing the architectural style. And committee acknowledged the tree team's objections that there is insufficient protection for the tree and landscaping. That particular issue has been overcome by the revised plan that is before you tonight. We also have objections from 63, 65, 69, 92, 92B, Hemnall Street, basically overdevelopment out of character, potential impact on the trees. 17 Thaden Place, concerns about privacy and overbearing development, and the Epping Society. We've also received an objection, which has been emailed to members, about the distances as shown on the plan on the boundary. This boundary is measured as 1.4 metres to the boundary, and this one is measured as 1.5 metres. The objector has said that it doesn't actually scale off. The officer himself has checked this, and it does scale off, and I checked it as well, so the distances on this plan are correct. In terms of the issues in this case, we have the design issues, which clearly has got some objections from both neighbours and the Town Council and Epping Society. However, it is the case there is no particular design along Hemnall Street, and the site isn't within the conservation area nor adjoining it. It's considered that this is not anything that would cause particular harm to the character and appearance of the street scene, and the materials would be appropriate. The building lines in that respect are fine, and there has been moved back for the trees. In terms of the impact on the neighbours in overlooking and loss of sunlight and daylight, it is considered that there is not anything that causes harm that would justify a refusal. While the rear elevation is beyond the properties, property at 69, it is not behind the property at 65, and there is no adverse overlooking of the rear elevations of these properties. There would be overlooking into the gardens, but you would expect that in an urban area in any event. So it's considered that there is no adverse impact on this property in terms of its impact on the neighbours, or in a loss of sunlight and daylight. And properties to the rear, the distance between them and the other properties in Thaden Grove is considerable, would be well in excess of what is considered acceptable. In terms of the tree and landscaping, the Council and Landscaping had concerns, but the revision of the building, moving it back, has overcome this, and they are happy that the planning conditions suggested can manage any other concerns. In terms of land drainage, this is can be dealt with by way of condition, and contaminated land has not been an issue on this particular site, but we could add conditions. Comments have been made by neighbours in respect of the inaccuracies within the plans. These have been referred back to the applicants. Revised drawings were submitted and published on the website. As I said, the officers have checked the measurements to the boundaries on both sides and are happy that what's shown on the plan is accurate on the drawings. Therefore, the recommendation is to approve.
Thank you very much. I'll note that we have two councillors who have come late because of other meetings. Can I ask if you've got any declarations of interest, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and apologies for lateness. Indeed, meetings seem to be coming fast today. I have two declarations of interest, one which you're currently hearing. Obviously, whilst as my wife tells me on a regular basis, I don't work anymore, I am the managing director of a company that would have been involved in this transaction some time ago. So whilst I'll be abstaining anyway this evening because I've come to the debate late, it is a non-pecuniary interest, and I would usually leave the meeting and not be voting. And the other item is a similar declaration on number 13.
Thank you, Chairman, and apologies again for lateness. Stuck in another meeting, unfortunately, but I have nothing to declare. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have three speakers for this application. Our first is Mr. Ian White, who is an objector And you, sir, have 3 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Key objections as follows. The design is absolutely out of keeping. It is in the middle of 15 Georgian-style detached houses at that southern end of Hemnall Street. Every property is either red brick or painted render with identical roof tiles. The majority have been sympathetically extended. However, all of them retain a Georgian facade and character without exception. Objections have been received from residents of these and the other style properties in Hemnall Street and Thaden Place. They all want this overriding pattern retained and respected. The proposal is a significant deviation in style and would irreversibly disrupt and destroy the street scene. The materials proposed are completely alien, yellow brick and slate roof, for example. The proposal is in very close proximity to Bell Common Conservation Area, which we should all respect. Number 2, massing and overdevelopment. Supporting documents have been provided. None of these 15 existing properties have been extended double depth, double height and almost full width to the boundary which this property implies it will happen. Properties alongside, opposite and the bungalows behind will suffer significantly from overbearing, overlooking, loss of light and privacy. Number 65, my home, has 8 windows on its side, which will all be severely impacted. It won't be minor harm as stated in the planning application. The applicant has incorrect misleading drawings, which we've highlighted. They are incorrect, and should you be minded to approve this application, please ensure that the distances outlined by the planning officer are conditioned. Number 3, tree protection, access and the environment. Again, supporting documents have been provided. The access area is only 4 metres wide from boundary to tree trunk of a significant protected tree. There are 2 trees impacted, the root systems under the whole frontage with large overhanging branches. These trees cannot be replaced should they be lost as a result of the proposal, as highlighted by the landscape team. It's a busy residential road. It's going to impact the parking, congestion, the emergency services. We have an old people's home a stone's throw from this property. The carbon footprint will be significantly greater for a demolition and new build rather than an extension to an existing property. It's unnecessary harm to the environment, which seems to be completely overlooked. In summary, the development is unquestionably out of keeping. It's far too big. It risks damage to protected trees and the environment. I would urge the committee to consider these heartfelt and absolutely credible objections from local residents whose homes and lives will be negatively impacted by approving this application. Please support avoiding the most welcome precedent in Epping and vote against this application. And one point I would like to add, all objectors have no problem whatsoever with a sympathetic extension of this property being done. This is just too big, overbearing, and it will be a first in Hemnall Street, and we do not want it. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Councillor Barbara Scruton of Epping Town Council.
Thank you, Chairman. Follow that. The planning officer has actually outlined our objections, but I'll just go through them again for you. The committee are concerned that the new proposal, including the demolition of the existing family dwelling with the new one, is out of place and it will be detrimental to the street scene. The design is out of keeping in this row of Georgian houses. I did note that the planning officer talked about an eclectic mix, but I don't think he's actually, if you look at the whole of the street, yes, but there are 60, this is a row of 16 Georgian houses with Georgian style bungalows at the back, so I think the whole area needs to be protected. The proposal, it is overdevelopment. If you looked at the design that you saw, you could actually see how much it has been, how much bigger it is than the existing property, and therefore it would have some impact on the neighbours. The material, I have to agree again, the material being proposed for the new development is not really appropriate. It's not in keeping with the Georgian look of the row of houses, and our committee did acknowledge the tree team objections and comments that there was insufficient protection for the trees and landscape retention, So I would urge the committee to refuse this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our third speaker is Mr. Alistair Allen, who is the applicant's agent.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, good evening. This is an application for a like-like. It's a replacement dwelling. It's a two-storey house that does have accommodation within the roof, but it is wholly within the roof. So you could say it's a three-storey house, you could say it's a two-storey house. It's interpretation, it's semantics. There is no fixed style of houses in Hemnall Street. Georgian in style, 1980s, 1970s Georgian. It's hardly Georgian. Therefore, there is no fixed style in this particular part of Epping. The Town Council's comments are based on the original drawings and elaborate on the other points raised that we've heard this evening. The tree survey, the tree issues rather, have now been sorted out. There were issues that Melinda Barham, your tree lady, had with the scheme, and we have revised that to Melinda's satisfaction. The project is not an overdevelopment. It meets the parking criteria. It meets the amenity criteria. The footprint of it is larger. From the rear of our house, it is 1.9 metres, and from the rear of the house to the right. At the moment, that house is actually 4.1 metres behind our one. And so, therefore, the impact that our one will be having is actually far less than the impact that the existing one is having on ours. If you then look at the house on the other side, that my friend here lives in, we are actually I'll correct this, we are not as far back as his two-storey extension, and so therefore the effect on him is going to be negligible. The boundaries, as we have heard, there may be an issue, but the officers have checked and there is no issue with those, so we can accept that they are in actual fact correct. The officer's report covers all of the above that I have just gone over in greater detail, and the recommendation is to approve, so I would respectfully request that that is what happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The recommended decision is to grant permission with conditions, of which there are quite a number. There are 13 listed in front of you. Councillors, who would like to go first? Councillor Macready.
Thank you, Chairman. Trees. We read here about the tree report. We read about the tree team objection. And in the conclusion, we read that there is a revised landscaping scheme which has been submitted, which removes the main objections submitted by this team. Only the main objections. I would quite like a little more detail on that, please. And while I'm speaking, I'm not really in favour, thinking of carbon footprint, of houses being demolished. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Godden, can you help us now with regard to the landscaping proposal?
I'd have to look it up, so yes. Well, yes, there'll be a brief pause while I try and find it.
Councillor Whitehouse, would you like to... John Whitehouse, were you first? Well, if John Whitehouse would like to go first.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, I was going to focus on the design issue, which I think is probably where a lot of the attention and concern focuses. And inevitably, it's not a cut and dried thing you can measure in the same way that you can measure certain other things. But I'm not sure I entirely agree with the planning officer that because of the variation in housing style across the length of Hemnall Street, which is a long street, you shouldn't take account of the character of individual parts of Hemnall Street. And there is sort of rhythm to the street. It starts off from Bell Common, and as we heard, is sort of predominantly red brick and render. It then turns into more sort of mixed residential institutional character, which is in fact where you get the first yellow stock brick with the vets building and Forest Court, and then moves back to being residential, and then back of High Street, and those are all sort of slightly different, albeit sometimes small, character areas. And one of the things that characterises the houses in this particular run of Hemnall Street is, although some of the houses are quite large, they're also quite sort of varied in terms of articulation and roof heights and extensions and so forth. Actually, very few of them, if you look at them, are symmetrical. Where we've got symmetrical houses, we tend to like symmetrical houses to keep the rhythm and the character of the area. But I suppose the same goes in the other way as well. I mean, this is the footprint, I suspect, is comparable to other houses in the area. The volume, because of the squarer nature and the way it fills the plot, is probably rather larger. So I think the design concerns that have been raised are legitimate, and what makes me minded to refuse the application, but I will listen to what other members have to say.
Thank you. We now have the landscaping, so Mr. Gold.
Yes, thank you. The landscaping report reads, as the second one, we have no objection to this application subject to the following conditions, the 3 tree protection conditions. And they said, further to our comments of the 31st of March, the driveway layout has been altered and now removes parking from directly under the crown of the lime tree. This removes our main previous objection. There is still concern for the surface routes, but the revised hard standing will impact on less of them, and a no-dig installation will be necessary. So while the applicant has provided a full tree report and or an arboricultural method statement, the above condition does need to be included in full, and updated reports will need to be submitted for approval prior to commencement. This is due to the alteration of the driveway. There's then other stuff which is more technical, which I'm not going to go to. But basically, the officers have said that they're happy that this can be granted, or they've got no objection to the application subject to the conditions, and those conditions would protect the trees. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Councillor Janet Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I must say, John Whitehouse said most of the things I was going to say. I was also going to focus on this comment the planning officer said several times about no particular style along Hemnall Street. I mean, it is a very long road. It goes from Bell Common right down to council offices here, so it would be surprising if there was a consistent design along the whole of that. But within it, there are pockets of consistent design, and this is one of them. And although Georgian may be not the right term for it, and they're not all exactly the same, there is a consistency. When you walk down there, you see that they all have this sort of cohesion, and this one just wouldn't fit in. I do also have concern about these trees. We've heard just now that although there's been some amelioration, there's still going to be some effect on the roots. They're beautiful trees. They really add to the beauty of that sort of area. And replacement would be not the same at all. And also, we have to consider it's a site really near the forest, and yet, we're thinking of pulling down a house and building another one, which, as Councillor McCready said, is not good for the environment. I won't try to go into all the technical terms, so I'm not good at that, but it's there in the reports that we've had that tell you about the effect on the environment. So, no, I won't be supporting this either. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to take issue with Councillor McCready and Councillor Whitehouse. We're sitting as a planning committee here. We cannot take into factor that knocking down a house is environmentally unsound. It may be environmentally unsound, but unfortunately the planning laws as they are at the moment allow that to happen. So we can't say we don't want a house to be demolished, therefore we can't give it planning permission. That's not within our gift to give. I do hear what the ward councillors say about the design. I think it's a less clear-cut issue than perhaps they do. There is certainly, even in this particular area of Hemnall Street, significant differences. Just if you turn, instead of looking that way and look that way, it is different. Whether that in itself is enough to make this acceptable, I think from my point of view it probably does, but I recognise that it's a balanced decision. But I certainly would not be supportive of any idea of refusing a planning application because it's environmentally unsound to demolish and rebuild.
Thank you. Councillor Burrows.
I must say, I do know Hemnall Street quite well, being the other side of the town as a Lindsay Street ward member. But Hemnall Street is eclectic. It is. You can walk from top to bottom, and there's so many different buildings. So I can't really actually see that this is a problem, particularly when you look at the sizes of some of the houses next door. I mean, the house that's going to be built is not going to be actually that much bigger. So I really can't see the problem with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stalker?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reinforce what Councillor Burrows said, we were shown a photo, I think, of the existing street view. Can we have a quick look back at that, please? I think it was this plot in the middle and the houses either side. Is there one more, Jerry? I'm sure we got one of the front of the house that's on this side, which is a different design entirely. It was just to reinforce, I don't think there is this carefully... you can see it on the right there now. The one that's on the right is a completely different style of house that's not red brick and doesn't look mock Georgian to me. So I just reinforce, I don't think there is that thread through Hemnall Street that people are suggesting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other councillor? Councillor McIver?
Thank you, Chairman. I think similar comments to some of my colleagues here. I understand the points that have been made about the street scene and pockets of street scene, and that does exist in some places. However, I'm not entirely convinced that Hemnall Street is the best example of that. The other point I was going to make was with regards to the actual street scene. The properties are very hidden in this part of Hemnall Street by very large trees, of course, hence why we're discussing their well-being. And so for that reason, I feel that minimises the impact on the street scene ever so slightly. And I think overall, the street scene element of this application, I actually think shifts me towards wanting to support this application, because I don't feel Hemnall Street has a street scene. It is very eclectic. Councillor Burrows is absolutely right with that word, perfect word to describe that road. And I remember I used to work there for 5 years as a Saturday boy in one of those shops and walk up and down Hemnall Street, and I've seen it change over that 5-year period as the properties have all changed in their fascia. So for that reason, I find the street scene argument quite difficult to give as a reason to refuse. I'm quite satisfied that the officers are satisfied with the tree report. So the two concerns that I did have initially, I feel have been resolved in this dialect.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to point out it is possible to demolish an old house and build a greener house. Now, whether this is the case, I'm not sure, but I suspect it probably is. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, Councillor Janet Whitehouse, you'd like to come back?
I just want to come back on Councillor Stalker's comment, which seemed to say that the house next door that was rendered was sort of out of style with the brick one. It's actually quite a mixed row of houses. A lot of them are rendered and some are brick. So I just wanted to correct that sort of impression perhaps that the rendered one was out of keeping.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors? We only have one proposal in front of us, and that is to grant permission with conditions as listed. So we will go straight to that vote. All of those in favour of granting permission with conditions as listed, please show now.
Eleven. 4.
Those against? Oh, sorry.
2, Chairman.
And abstentions?
Two.
In which case planning permission is granted. Before we move on, I would just like to apologise for some problems here with the chairman's microphone. The way I should be there, and that microphone isn't working, which is why I'm having to sit at an ordinary microphone, which is creating a few problems. And I thank you for your forbearance. We will now go, can we get, oh, Councillor Whitbread is back. We will now go on to number 12 on the agenda, which is 0897/21 135 Ongar Road, Lambourne. Mr. Godden.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a single-storey side and rear extension. This is a site that's a row of semi-detached houses between Ongar and Passingford Bridge. It's protected, as you can see here, by a bund from flooding, which was put in some years ago. The site is within the green belt, and this scheme would see an existing conservatory, existing conservatory removed, and which is this, sorry, that's there, isn't it? That's the existing conservatory removed and a single-storey extension across the width of the property and to the side as well. This is the view of the front of the property. You can see there's already a two-storey side extension up to the boundary. The single-storey extension would be behind this, and so wouldn't be visible from the street scene. And again, this is the property to the front. If I can get the cursor up, there we go. Right. Okay, the cursor. And then we have the rear. So if the picture in the bottom left will show this conservatory will be demolished and a single-storey extension across the width of the property and in the infill gap at the back. So this actually shows it a little better. You can see here's the two-storey extension that you could see at the front, and so that will be infilled at the ground floor and across here with this conservatory being removed. So the plan shows the existing form of the building and the existing elevation, a two-storey extension to the side. And this shows the proposed floor plans with the single-storey extension at the back. So this area here, where my cursor is slowly going over, is the infill replacing the existing conservatory in this area. So you can see here that the hatched brickwork is the new brickwork here, a single-storey side extension, side and rear extension. You can see it comes out from the inset at the back here and from each side. Okay, so we have had objections to this scheme. Lambourne Parish Council have objected on loss of light to the neighbour. Access to the manhole cover means that Thames Water would not be able to investigate and resolve blockages. 7 objections have been received. 6 of those concern the drains and sewerage with no objection to the rear extension. One of them has complained about or objects to the rear and side extension. No side access to my property in me allowing access via my own side gate. Loss of light to my kitchen conservatory. Outlook and noise from the back door being in closer to proximity, devaluing my property. In this case, the main issues are the impact on the green belt and the impact on the amenities of the neighbours in terms of loss of light, sunlight, and impact of the actual scheme, and in this case, land drainage. From a planning permission, from a green belt perspective, the question here is there is going to be an 80% increase over the original floor area, but this is a modest single-storey flat roof extension, which can be seen in context with the other extensions you've seen from the aerial photograph on this site, and is not visible from public viewpoints. And it is considered that it has no adverse impact on the openness and character of the green belt and would be very difficult to justify refusal in green belt terms. In terms of the neighbours' amenities, as you can see, the officer has put some paragraphs in there about the scheme, and it's considered that there isn't any adverse impact to the neighbours on either side in terms of either a loss of light or overlooking from the property. With regard to the land drainage, this can be conditioned, and it also requires... sorry, can it be conditioned? Yes, but it also requires permission from Thames Water as a separate issue because it's within 3 metres of a public sewer. So that would be a matter for Thames Water to deal with. So the conclusion is that the proposed side and rear extension, by reason of its size and siting, has a limited impact and not constitutes inappropriate development, so there's no harm on the openness of the green belt. And it meets design and appearance levels of what we would expect. So in that instance, it is considered that this is suitable, and the recommendation is to approve subject to the relevant conditions.
Thank you very much. We have 3 speakers. Our first speaker is Mr. Charles Porto, who is an objector.
Thank you, Chairman.
No.
Thank you, Chairman. I recently sold the property, having lived there for 33 years. And the reason why I've lived there for so long was that it is rural. The cottages, rather than houses, have a certain je ne sais quoi. People buy to live there because it's rural, it's quiet, they enjoy panoramic views, and not to be boxed in. And I believe the side extension will create a boxed in environment and will be definitely detrimental to the light. Now, I know this having lived there for so long. The existing side extension that was seen in the photography was the first time that a side extension, I think in the whole of Lambourne, was granted to boundary. It was previously regarded as overdevelopment. Now, the orientation of this property is southwest. And what is a very nice, endearing feature is seeing the sunset through the conservatory in the southwest. This will completely block the ability to see the sunset and the visual amenity and the enjoyment of the property. In terms of the existing double-storey side extension, I know that the living room side light gets darker earlier. So therefore, and I know from monitoring energy bills that I've had to switch lights on, which I never previously did. So by having that extended, it will definitely impact on the light factor. And I did send photographs that was prepared by through the guidance of a right of light surveyor who pointed out that under the right of light legislation, potentially 45% light would be lost. So I fundamentally disagree, based on expert opinion, that there will be no loss of light, because they most certainly will be, based on that evidence. In regard to the property itself, you've pointed out the bund. The bund predominantly protects from the river. And the Environment Agency carried out, and this is a matter of fact, a matter of record, comprehensive topology studies where it was determined...
If you're going to wind up now, that's fine.
Okay, well, they determined that there's a water table issue, and a water table issue rears its ugly head every time it rains heavily, which impacts on the drains, which is why 7 objectors, including myself, feel that having an offset drain going over Manhill will be totally detrimental, especially when you've lived with raw sewage coming up through the sewers. And if Councillor Brian Rolfe was here, or previously Councillors McEwen, Gerald and Maggie, who have attended site and seen the problems, they would endorse the points I've made. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Councillor John Philby of Lambourne Parish Council.
Good evening, Chairman and Councillors. I'm here speaking on behalf of Lambourne Parish Council. Having viewed this property, and I've been inside it and we've viewed it from all angles, the Parish Council is in complete agreement with Mr Porto. If this side extension should be granted and go further down to where it is now, it will block the light from Mr Porto's conservatory. Can you hear me? I can see people leaning forward. I'm wondering, can I be heard? Oh, right, good. We are always against this building up to boundaries because by building up to the boundary, it obviously blocks the light from the next door's conservatory. Many years ago, there was 1.2 million spent on this flood alleviation scheme that Mr Porto referred to. And part of this scheme is a non-return valve agreement with the Thames Water, and this would obstruct that valve should Thames Water need to get to it. I'm not saying they won't be able to get to it, but it would make it very difficult, and that is all to do with the flooding of these cottages. Last time they were flooded to up to 1 metre in height inside the buildings. We, the Parish Council, also think that allowing building up to the boundaries should not be allowed, although I know this authority does at times allow this. And I know for a fact that they cannot access their back garden. This is not a planning problem, as I understand it, it's the residents' problem. But of course, with the bins being all left outside because they can't get them to their back garden, they have to be left outside. It's an unsightly, upsets the street scene. There's always a lot of talk about street scenes, but it's not just about the buildings, it is about what's left outside these buildings, especially in this lovely row of cottages. And it will set a precedent. Can you imagine this lovely row of cottages all having these big side extensions up to their boundaries? We will end up with a ribbon effect right the way along. So we do not object to the rear extension. It's just that side extension to the boundary that we strongly object to. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Our third speaker is Ms. Lauren Purdy, who is the applicant.
I've got a loud voice. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you, because my friend up there has just messaged me to say this is the best Wednesday she's had in years. Okay, so with me. The objection made do not hold any weight and are not based on factual information. I will deal with each of these objections in turn. The first objection is for loss of access to the manhole cover, resulting in Thames Water not being able to investigate and resolve blockages, and it is suggested that this contravenes the active non-return valve agreement. I've been informed that this concern was raised by the previous neighbour, who's now moved, who's just done his speech, who then passed this concern on to other neighbours and the parish council. Unfortunately, they were misinformed. Access to the manhole cover will be retained, and I've clarified this with my architect and Thames Water. As I'm sure the committee are aware, as part of the building regulation application, you have to apply to Thames Water for a build over consent, and this will ensure that Thames Water will retain access to their drain. Trevor Baker at EFTC Environmental Protection and Drainage notes this too. Secondly, the house is not in flood zone 1, and therefore there is no requirement for a flood risk assessment, so the neighbours should not be concerned with this. The second objection in relation to loss of light to a neighbour. There is no evidence whatsoever supplied to support the view that there is any impact on daylight. The side elevation of 137 faces approximately west, with the front elevation of 137 facing approximately south. Therefore, there is no greater loss of light. As per the planning report, the windows to the side elevation that are in question actually are a secondary source of light and not primary. Lastly, there was an objection from the previous neighbour at 137 that the extension would mean I would be required to use his side entrance as I would not have my own. Again, I must add, this is incorrect. I will be using my own side entrance. It will just be internal. There's a door at the front, a door at the back, and I wheel my bins through. Before he left the property, he actually said I couldn't use the side entrance anyway and took away the bin. So that's what I've been doing since anyway. So that's void. It would appear that the previous neighbour at 137 has attempted to cause hysteria amongst the residents of Hillman's Cottages, as he believed the planning application could affect the sale of his home. This wasn't the case, as the sale went through and he now resides in Brentwood. Clearly, in panic mode, he has misinformed others incorrectly. And finally, I should add that the new residents at 137, who are very pleasant, do not have any concern to the planning application and can put this in writing if necessary. As stated in the planning report, the planning application does not violate planning policy, and so I would suggest that it should therefore be approved. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Right, thank you very much. Members will probably know this site mainly from the amount of flood defence work that went on around all of these houses for a number of years. The attempt was obviously to make them safe when the road in floods, which it does very regularly. I would also remind members that the question of Thames Water and the drainage is not something that we are considering here. We are considering only the planning application in front of us, and that a separate application will have to be made to Thames Water to ensure that they are happy with the work as carried out. Yes. So the new technology is letting us down again. I was going to say this is very nice to be back in the council chamber, and indeed it is, but clearly we're still having a few technical problems. Okay, councillors, the recommended decision is to grant permission with conditions. There's only 4 there. Who would like to speak first? Right. Oh, right. Okay, Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Jim. I think somebody should say something about this. It's been a very interesting presentation and 3 detailed submissions from our public speakers. And again, I think like the last application, there is a certain degree of balance in some of this. But looking at the properties in question and looking at what's being proposed, I think it does fall clearly in line with what the planning officer has recommended. And as such, I think it's the right decision to make, and we'll be supporting this application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Whitbread.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Likewise, there's a balanced decision here to be taken. One of the things I would pick up on is over the Thames Water item, and I know that's a separate application, but is there any opportunity for us to put a recommendation in place that application is fulfilled before construction starts, or is that felt to be unfair?
No, you couldn't do that, Councillor, because it's another jurisdiction, so no.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Any other councillors? Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's also worth noting that the existing sewers under the premises are mentioned at the end of the report. So there's obviously an existing agreement already in place at some point. And I think it is balanced. A lot of work's gone into looking at the conditions and the impact that it might have. And I think on balance it's probably okay. Thank you.
Thank you. In which case, members, the recommended decision is to grant permission with conditions. All those in favour? Oh, I'm sorry?
I thought Councillor Whitbread asked for the condition and advisory around the Thames Water to be added.
I thought Mr Godden said we couldn't do that because it was a different jurisdiction.
But we can add the advisory. I think it says on page 54 that they were happy to add the advisory, that it's required. If we can't make it a condition, we can certainly add it as an advisory.
In which case, Mr Godden, are you happy that we have an advisory condition only on that?
Well, it wouldn't be a condition, it would be an informative saying they should seek the authority of Thames Water if they're the relevant people. Yes, I mean, members wanted that, it could go on.
Members, are you all happy that we add that to the conditions then? Okay. In which case, with that addition, the recommended decision is to grant permission. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much. In which case, there's none against and there's no there's nothing else. So, planning permission is granted. We will now go on to number 13 on the agenda, which is application 0991/21 189 Lindsay Street. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a first floor extension with front and rear dormers, including a Juliet balcony at the rear. So this is part of Lindsay Street. Oops, no, it would probably help if I shared it, wouldn't it? There we go. Right. Okay, so the site is quite a long, elongated rectangular site, a part of a ribbon of development in the rural area of Lindsay Street. You can see here the aerial photograph, if I can get the cursor to work. So the actual property is this pyramidal bungalow here with other properties either side, as we'll see in the next slide. So this the property is in the middle, which is the one that's being asking permission to be extended. You can see the other properties either side or bungalows as well, rooms in the roof on both of the properties on the other side with dormers on the one on the right. The ridge height is there because this is how they intend to go up, is to raise the ridge of the property in line with the adjacent properties. Looking to the rear, you can see rooms in the roof in both of the adjacent properties and the kind of depth of the garden. So this plan shows the existing property here, and the proposed extension, which will see the roof being raised up and dormers placed in the roof to the front and the rear with a Juliet balcony at the back. Okay. Oops. So we have received objections to this scheme. Town Council have objected overdevelopment of the property, turning the bungalow into a house. Extension will result in the loss of another bungalow and loss of amenity as it will be taller and overshadow the neighbouring bungalow. And then they go on about, make reference to the local plan and the issue of bungalows. The Epping Society have objected concerns surrounding the design and the impact on neighbouring amenities in terms of loss of privacy and overshadowing. So the main issues are impact on the openness and character of the greenbelt, design and living conditions. In terms of greenbelt, this wouldn't have any significant adverse impact in terms of there would be no increase in ground floor footprint, and while the building would be slightly higher with the dormers front and rear, it's similar to the neighbours either side, and it's considered there wouldn't be any adverse impact on the character and appearance of the greenbelt. In terms of design, the proposal does involve alterations to the roof by raising the ridge height and changing the appearance, with 3 dormers at the front of the property and a box dormer at the back. This is a revised scheme to reduce the height of the property, but having looked at this, officers of the opinion the design is perfectly acceptable and something that could be found around the whole district as well, and it feels that there's no adverse impact. In terms of overlooking and overshadowing of neighbours, it is considered due to the orientation of this property and the other neighbouring properties, there is no adverse impact on the neighbours in either overshadowing or loss of light due to this scheme. With regard to the bungalow, this is clearly the Town Council objected on the application, saying that the proposal would result in the loss of the bungalow. This proposal allows for creation of accommodation within the loft, which is constrained within the roof space, and it wouldn't alter the external appearance to an unacceptable degree, which would result in the loss of the bungalow. If you look to the original photograph, sorry, yeah, get back onto this. Just a minute. If we were to look at for example, the bungalow on the right, is clearly that there's a bungalow on the left without dormers, but that's got a room in the roof, and there's a bungalow on the right that has dormers on the front. And in this instance, it is considered that this wouldn't mean that there is a loss of a bungalow. And it is also noted that permitted development rights are still intact on the site, which means they could create a loft conversion in any effect, provided it meets the requirements of the General Permitted Development Order. So in this case, the officer's conclusion is it's not an appropriate development within the green belt. It's an acceptable design. It causes no loss of light or privacy to the neighbours, and it doesn't result in the loss of a bungalow. So the recommendation is to approve.
Thank you. We have two speakers. Our first speaker is Councillor Barbara Scruton of Epping Town Council.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the committee did feel that this proposal is an overdevelopment of the property, and the proposal would turn the bungalow into a house. I think I've sat here before and had discussions about what's a bungalow and whether being able to get into the roof, it turns it into a house. There's also a loss of amenity with the proposal, as it would be a lot higher and overshadow the neighbouring bungalows. The importance of this type of bungalow accommodation has been recognised in the emerging local plan. The emerging local plan refers to the accessibility of bungalows and rooms in the roof do not equal accessibility. The constant development of traditional single-storey bungalows is eroding the stock of bungalows in the town, where there is an identified need for people wishing to downsize, adversely affecting the mix of dwellings and types available, contravening evidence and the emerging local plan and draft Epping neighbourhood plan. So, as I say, we felt this proposal we objected to this proposal, and we would respectfully ask you to object to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Michael Woolley via Zoom.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me? Hello.
We can hear you, but we can't see you at the moment. So,
right, no problems. To be honest, Mr. Godden has covered everything I would have said in any case, and he said it far more eloquently than I could ever imagine. So I'll pass on mine and hand it over.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I wish all our speakers were that brief, I tell you. I seem to remember that this committee had some considerable discussions a few years ago as to what actually was a bungalow, and the question of whether you considered that a chalet bungalow was still a bungalow, because it didn't have a first floor that was as big as the ground floor. And I think we came to the conclusion in the end that even with build a room in the roof, it was still a bungalow, because you could live entirely on the ground floor if you wanted to. But the designation of a bungalow was not clear. However, members, the recommended decision is to grant permission with conditions, of which there are 3. Who would like to start?
Thank you, Chairman. And I know Councillor Phillip is desperate to get in and talk about the definition of, of a bungalow, so I won't leave it, I won't talk for too long. I do have a question for the officer around permitted development rights and what would be permitted under those rights. I mean, in terms of character, I don't necessarily see this as out of character with the street scene. Obviously, you look along that section of Lindsay Street and most of the properties are converted bungalows, and there is a real mixture in terms of the character of the different properties. So in terms of character, I can't see that argument really holding up. I do sympathise with the concerns around the impact on neighbours' amenity, and I wonder whether there could be any conditions put in place in terms of obscuring of glass on any windows towards the top. But my main question at this stage is in relation to those permitted development rights. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Basically, they could convert the current pyramidal roof to 2 gable ends, so a gable end in each, making it a pitched roof, and then they could put dormers on the back. They would need permission for dormers on the front, though, but so they could change it to a pitched roof of the same height and put dormers on the back without the need for planning permission. Because we've yet to find a dormer on the back that really does need planning permission because the rights are so generous. With regard to the obscure glazing issue, it wouldn't be necessary because it's only looking out onto the neighbour's garden. That would only be required if we were looking into their rear elevations. There is an acceptance that you will have overlooking of garden areas in urban, well, everywhere, basically.
Thank you. Other councillors? Yes, Councillor Phillip.
But you can't guess what I'm going to talk about. Yeah, I mean, it is around this bungalow definition, and in some ways I think what we've got here is pushing right at the boundaries of what we were planning in terms of protecting around in the low plan. I don't know if, Mr. Gordon, could you just put up that last slide of yours again, the one that shows the previous, well, the existing and the proposed shapes. And I think the issue here is when you look at the change in what's being proposed from either the north elevation or the south elevation, what we've got is a significant increase in the ridge height. We've got dormers front and back. It makes the upper area significantly bigger than would be, coming back to Councillor Whitbread's point, what would be allowed in terms of permitted development. I think this is really pushing at the boundaries of what we were trying to protect against, which is significantly enlarging bungalows to an extent that they become two-storey habitable houses. And I take your point from previously about chalet bungalows, and I think that one actually fell, in my view, the other side of the line in terms of protecting bungalows, and I did vote for that one. I can't see, looking at the north and south elevations and the proposed east elevation, that we are maintaining a bungalow compared to what it is at the moment, and as such I cannot support this application.
Thank you. Other councillors? Yes, Councillor Whitehouse.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add, but the distinguishing point of a bungalow is that the main accommodation is on the ground floor, if not all on the ground floor. And once you've got a complete reconstruction of a roof, you know, to put in 4 extra rooms, including the master bedroom, which clearly is, you know, main accommodation, I don't think the description of a bungalow fits. But having said that, you know, I think the fallback position of the permitted development is significant here, because if, you know, the look and the impact on the green belt is essentially the same under permitted development as it would be under the planning permission, albeit for the front dormers, it's difficult to see the purpose that's served by refusing the application.
Thank you. Councillor MacGyver?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, no doubt that this is not a bungalow, it is a house. That's my verdict. And I think there's, from what I've read in the report, there's not really an attempt to try and say it is a bungalow, in the sense that it clearly, to me, it looks like a 2-storey house. And being quite familiar with Lindsay Street, you know, many of the properties are houses. I don't know their history, whether they were previously bungalows. And I think that it would almost be if someone was trying to build a bungalow in Lindsay Street, it would almost, in certain parts of it, that would disrupt the street scene to an extent. So for that reason, I feel that if the officers are happy with what's been done from a structural perspective, I can completely see that it's a completely different property. You know, it may as well be. I can't see a reason why I'd be able to refuse this application, other than we have pointed out that in the local plan we do want to try and retain these single-storey bungalow properties, but I find it very difficult to disagree with the officers on this one.
Thank you. Councillor Brady?
Yes, I just wanted to chip in here as well, just at a slightly different angle. Just that no neighbours have objected at all to this application. So there are no objections, but once again the Town Council has jumped in on the bandwagon of the bungalow issue. I'm not saying that's good, I'm not saying it's bad, and now it is a little bit of our policy supporting bungalows, but I just do slightly have to question. Yes, it's very good of Mr. Scruton to turn up here and speak and everything, and it's good the Town Council are concerned, but it would seem that actually none of the neighbours are particularly concerned, unless possibly some of them have been to the Town Council and asked them to speak on their behalf. So I do think we should also just take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, Councillor Whitbread.
Microphone. Thank you, Chairman. Just on the planning history of the road and that section of the road in particular, would the officer be able to advise in relation to any recent extensions of bungalows? Because I know there has been a number of extension works, and whether they've come in as kind of formal planning applications or whether they've been done under permitted development rights. And sorry if that's a difficult question. Thank you.
The simple answer to that is no, I can't answer that, not without some significant research.
Right, Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there's an important point to pick up here as well, which Mr. Godden showed in the photographs, in that they're trying to blend in the existing with what's already there on either side. And if you look at the impact on living conditions, it actually says that the actual increase in roof height is only 1.05, which is just over a metre. So it's very negligible. Also, it allows people to stay in a home that they probably lived in for some time and just want to convert the loft. And it's making a better use of existing spaces that are already available. And when they're insulated and done to a high standard, I know that they are still bungalows, but chalet bungalows. My parents have a chalet bungalow and they make good use of the space in the loft. It just means that they go from 1 bedroom to 2 bedrooms. So I can see the benefits of a chalet bungalow. I can also see the benefits of having a policy around retaining bungalows. But in this case, I think that the impact on the green belt is negligible, the impact on the neighbours is negligible, and therefore I think I'll be supporting this application.
If I could just come back on what Councillor Bedford was saying, I do recognise that it's only 1.05 metres in height, but it is worth saying that is 20% of the existing building's height. So it all depends on how you look at numbers.
Yes, let's not get into statistics. You can make them say anything you want, but I understand there's views on both sides here. Well, the proposal is that we grant permission with conditions. All those in favour, please show. Oh, sorry.
12 for.
Those against?
Two.
And abstentions? 1. In which case planning permission is granted. Item 14, I've Councillor Whitbread would like to come back. Is he still outside, Councillor Burrows? I would like to thank members for their forbearance while we've suffered with minor technical problems, which we hope will be overcome by the time of our next meeting.